Thank you for listening to In the Keep. Please consider taking a moment to leave a review, comment, a like, and subscribe on your listening platform of choice. It really helps, and it's greatly appreciated. If you really love the show and want to see it grow, consider supporting us via Patreon. Supporters get episodes early, exclusive content and updates, chances to ask questions to guests, access to In the Keep's video games, and whatever else I can do for you. Every little bit helps. This podcast directly supports my ability to do what I love the most and to take care of my growing family. You can find links to everything that I'm talking about here over at inthekeep.com. Thank you, bless you, and enjoy the show. Hello, and this is going to be a really special episode of In the Keep. As always, I'm Tyler Brannon, aka The Motherlode, and so I've been letting you guys know over the past several weeks that I would be taking special stories. So if you're listening to this when it comes out, first of all, happy Halloween. And the plan here is I'm going to read off. I've got 4 of them that I've picked. People have written in ghost stories or paranormal experiences, or I was pretty open-ended about what I asked for. So if you didn't get yours in this time, that's okay. If you didn't get picked, that's also okay. There'll be other ones in the future. But just keep coming because I plan to do this more often. So kind of just to like preface this a bit, it's not something that I've really talked about a lot in the past on the show, but just in general, the more scary, paranormal, spiritual stuff. I've definitely gotten into it more recently on the podcast. If you didn't already check out our episode with Tony Manfredonia, he talked a lot about like his experience, from a religious experience, but writing an album, called Anchored, where he felt that he kind of like did battle with a demon, and whether you take that literally or not, I think it's pretty powerful stuff, and I think it's worth diving into. So without any further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce some of these stories here. They're from various people. The first one is actually from, we're going to call him Billy, writing in from Alabama. And it goes a little something like this. I remember as a teenager, a bunch of us were working at a haunted house, which is a lot of fun. At about 10 o'clock, this little old man appeared out of nowhere, walking up to the sidewalk. At least 75 people were still waiting to go through the haunted house, but time just seemed to stop as this little old man walked up with his head down. Everyone stepped back as he walked into the haunted house without saying anything or even paying to go in. Everyone was speechless and confused as to who it could possibly be. Being from a small town where everybody knows everybody, this gave us all a little chill. Even the people working were afraid to say anything. After a good 20 minutes, the old man emerged from the house and simply walked away into the darkness. Rumors started flying around town about the little old man on Halloween night. Was it a stranger? Or someone from the past looking for someone in the haunted house? Talk went around for weeks about the little old man. Would he reappear again one day? If he did, would or could we make ourselves speak to him? I don't think so. To this day, almost 60 years later, people still speak of the little old man who showed up at our haunted house in a small town in Alabama. Many still wonder who or what it could have possibly been. So this time of year, people can still be heard telling the story of the little old man who showed up in this little Alabama town on Halloween that mesmerized and scared an awful lot of people. This is how legends begin. Yeah, so that's a really weird story. It's interesting, and thank you, Billy, for donating your story to the show. I really appreciate this one. I find it, first of all, it's in Alabama, which if you don't know, listen to this. That's where I'm from. So it's a bit of an interesting story. It's actually based in like Citronelle, Alabama, and I grew up around that area, so Definitely something. One of those stories that still gets told around the old folks that lived during that time frame and would have been there. Uh, these are strange because it's not like an apparition or like a poltergeist, anything like really happened that's significant other than it's a group sighting. Like everyone witnessed this. Lots and lots of people saw it. It's one of those things where, on one hand, it could be easily explained. Like maybe it was someone that they just didn't know. But the fact that everyone kind of felt that same paralysis, the fact that everyone was sort of confounded, unable to speak, sharing something like this, it's very strange, and it's I don't know. I'm sure there's a rational explanation to this one. I just kind of feel like there's something that could possibly explain this outside of it has to be a spirit. But I think that's the case with a lot of these stories. I'm curious, and that will be the case with all of these. What do you listeners think? And I'd like for you to write in if you do. If you're from that area and you actually have heard this story and you do have a theory, I'd really especially like to hear that. Uh, but that's kind of the whole point of this, just to kind of like share our experiences, our ideas, and get an idea of what people, you know, what are people seeing, and compare them. It's nothing to be taken too seriously. It's nothing that you need to like. I don't know. I'm sure someone's gonna write in and say like, either A, I'm an idiot for even listening to this stuff, like, oh, it's all scientific, blah blah blah. You can't prove it. And sure, that's the thing about these stories though, is that like it's the stuff you can't prove. It's the stuff you can't come up with an explanation for that are worth talking about. The ones that are like like a Scooby Doo episode where it's always like old man Jenkins or whatever in a sheet with some there's some simple explanation. Of course, like that happens. But for every 100 of those, there's got to be one of them in there that's like, oh, can't explain it. Same thing with crop circles and stuff like that. I mean, of course, there's definitely people going out there doing it as a prank, but then the ones that you can't explain, those are the ones that I find particularly interesting. So again, thanks Billy for writing in, and on to the next one. So our next story comes from, we're going to call him K, and he says, my aunt was a spiritual woman. No idea to what degree and if she was educated or experienced in it. She always said her youngest daughter, Natasha, was an old soul. Natasha seemed empathetic and always was nice to my brother and me. Not sure if she was an old soul, as I was too young or inexperienced to see or feel what I think. Just a little brief thing here. I believe, and I could be wrong, so feel free to write me back and correct me on this. Like by empathetic, I think you mean empathic, maybe, like as in someone who, for those that are just not super into this stuff, like the same way that you would talk about someone who's telepathic, as in they can read thoughts, and empath is someone who can read feelings. A great example of this in culture would be like Deanna Troi, the Betazoid counselor from Star Trek: The Next Generation. This is definitely something that's going to come up a lot on the show as we go forward. So just a brief aside there, but we'll keep going. So back to Kay here. We lived at my aunt's house for like half a year. Every now and again, things at the home kind of violently escalated. My aunt had a rough life, and I heard she was a prostitute at some point. No idea what's true. She seemed lived through and sort of cynical, but she had a warm heart and we always felt welcome. But she had a cold house, odd statues and antiques all over the place, fond memories of feeling carefree there, eating plums from the tree in the backyard, etc. One day I ran up the stairs like I always do, and I just want to go fast, right? Stairs always scare me, not sure why. Dark corners, maybe. So I run up the stairs, and another flight of stairs up to the top floor, which was the attic where my brother and I slept. I spent tons of time there reading my aunt's books, but could be wrong, but there's books there, obviously, on stuff like out-of-body experiences and things like that. So, as I arrived on the top floor, this is the last 2 or 3 steps maybe, under me, I stepped through this dark shape or void in the shape of a person. And it looked like a cutout or a negative space in like a hole in reality, in the shape of a person, like a 3D silhouette. As I stepped through it, I thought, quoting here, "It was him." And I don't know what you mean by that, but that is what it says here. Going on, and I felt my own surprise and its surprise. Excited and confused, I go down again immediately, and I tell my aunt that I stepped through a shadowy silhouette of a person. She was visibly startled and said that she had purified the house and that there were no ghosts. I didn't understand what she meant, and she said she'd have to purify the house again. I didn't have a similar experience afterwards. So that's interesting, Kay, and dude, I really appreciate you writing this one. And this is we're going to talk about this in actually a lot in the next episode that I'm putting out with author and paranormal investigator named M.L. Bullock. So mark your calendars. That'll be, I guess, a few days after this one releases. So this doesn't really sound like, what is usually called a ghost. The last story also is not necessarily a ghost. It's just like a shared experience of something strange that people can't explain. In this case, not a shared experience. You're by yourself, so there's always, I guess, the possibility that you're insane. But I doubt that. So this sounds like you had an experience with what often gets called like a shade or a shadow person. I'm no expert on any of this stuff. I'm just a nerd who watches a lot of videos, reads a lot of books and stuff. But we are going to deeply address this issue of what these are in our next episode with M.L. Bullock. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what people think of that. But again, for the folks out there listening, what do you think? Have you ever had an experience like this? Is this guy crazy? Or, are there other people who have had similar things happen to them or seen something remotely close? We could get into a whole lot of stuff. Like there's a podcast called the Y Files. I guess it's a play on X Files, but literally like WHY Files, that actually does a whole episode about the different iterations of shadow people. I recommend listening to that too, if you haven't already. Yeah, creepy. Very creepy. Let's move on to the next. This one comes from, we're going to call her A. And I think this is a really, really interesting one. It's, I'm just going to get into it. So this took place in 2011. The Halloween that you celebrate in America is just a sugar rush and has almost nothing to do with the original pagan Samhain. Samhain is a way to pronounce this. If anybody out there is a fan of Glenn Danzig or the Misfits, you probably know his band called Samhain. I believe that the actual way to say this is, I think it's an Irish word, is Samhain. But anybody listening, please feel free to correct me or, tell me what your opinion is, whatever it happens to be. I don't know a lot about this stuff, but nevertheless, let's continue on. So anyway, me and my friends went to the forest to celebrate Samhain with the proper ritual. And it was my first one. I was in my early 20s and I had just moved to St. Petersburg, Russia, not Florida, just based on the person who's writing this. And so I had only known this group of friends for a few months before going off into the deep forest with them at night. Already got some questions about your choices here, but let's go on. There were 4 of us, but the main character of the story is Yosef. Around 9 p.m., we took the train, got into the forest, and began making preparations. Yosef was the leader, knowing the most about this sort of thing, and began telling us what to do in order to prepare for the ritual. He told me to gather twigs and logs for the fire. It was super dark, very cold and wet from the first snow. I was scared because of the setting and knowing that these people, I didn't know them so well, but knowing what they were into this stuff, right? I didn't know what to expect. I had never been involved in such a ritual before. Would they sacrifice me? I told Yosef, I can't do this because it's so dark, so he offered to come along with me. Something deep inside of me gave me the feeling that I wasn't safe, and we only had one flashlight between us, and it was not even a very bright one. Nevertheless, we went together deeper into the woods and heard a sort of voice in the woods, in the wind, in the sounds of the forest. I thought I was hallucinating, but it was like a voice saying, Yosef. And I was terrified. Was someone tricking us? The other group was nearby, but it definitely couldn't have been them because we looked towards them and they were also shocked. The voice was not human, and everyone present heard it, so, it was so creepy. And the sound was not something that a person could imitate, really. Although I just tried to imitate it, but I don't think it's doing justice to whatever A here experienced. It was so loud as if the entire forest were talking at once. It was now almost midnight, and the portal was open. The portal to the other world is open during Samhain. That's part of this whole thing, I guess. Also like Dia de los Muertos in Spanish, or what we call Halloween. So this was when the spirits are able to enter our realm, and I felt a presence, and so this added to my fear. Everything felt alive, like it was breathing and watching around us. This was like a feeling of being watched by things that are not there. Things that are not, they are alive, and at the same time, they are not. At this, Yosef became furious. He began to shout at them and he didn't seem like himself. Something triggered this in him, and he does not use this in his normal life. It's not a way that he typically acts. I've known him for years now and have never seen him like this otherwise. This is the one moment in his life that he was, and I'm quoting, this person. He was inhuman, as if something had entered him. That's really scary, by the way, for anybody who studies spirits and demonology or anything like that. That right there is terrifying just to hear that, for me. But nevertheless, it goes on to say, I don't think that he was possessed, but that something deep within him was awakened. Also possible. I felt fear, but not the fear of being scared, but more like a child witnessing aliens coming down to Earth or something like that. We managed to make a fire and conduct our ritual once he had calmed down. Everything was over, like a switch turned off, and the presence disappeared. This was the best Halloween of my life so far. Even telling the story now, people still find it frightening. Yes, I do. And I feel now that what I witnessed was a moment when the spirits managed to make a real connection through Yosef. Yikes. That's terrifying. I don't know if you're still friends with Yosef. I think you, based on the way you wrote this, probably. I don't know. I'm definitely not an authority on the subject. I'm certain a lot of people, especially like our more Christian-oriented audience, are going to say this dude definitely, opened himself up to the spirit realm, and that something tried to jump into his body, maybe possess him. I'm not sure. But usually, like when you hear about exorcisms and stuff like that, it's always like, well, we were playing with a Ouija board and it said it was my mom and asked if it could come in. And I invited it in, and then boom, now you got to get exorcised or whatever. It's terrifying. This is scary. Like kind of shaken just when I was editing, to get ready to do this. Like it's creepy. But thank you for sharing. And, be careful when you're playing out there in the woods, kids. Although it sounds like just based on you saying it was the best experience ever, best Halloween ever. Cool. I mean, that's really interesting. I'd like to hear, if anybody else has any opinions about this, but also like anybody out there who's like a practicing pagan or Wicca, that kind of stuff. If you've had similar experiences, to see if like there's a connection here. I've heard of people, I know that people do these sorts of things. Actually, a lot of stuff like this, but I don't really know much about the rituals themselves and what they entail. There's no detail here given about what that is. I'm not sure if it's private. I'm not, maybe not. Clearly, there's a fire involved. But, you hear about witches and Wicca and pagan type folks like that do these things, and there's always like that stereotype. I even have I think it's a t-shirt from like a black metal band that shows like kind of women dancing around a fire as part of one of these ceremonies. But yeah. I'd love to know more. If there's any books out there or maybe documentary or something that I could get sped up on, that'd be really great too. So yeah, what are your thoughts, folks? Let us know in the comment section, or feel free to join our Discord. It's discord.inthekeep.com, and under the In the Keep channel, just fire away because I'm super stoked to hear what people think. That's yeah, a little scary, that one. And that brings us to our last story. This one is a really special one. It's from my mom, so I hope you enjoy it. My mom is someone that I love dearly and trust with all my life, She gave birth to me and all that, raised me, so I take her very seriously. Uh, but I'm curious what you guys think. So the preface is in January of I'm reading in my mom's voice. That's really weird. But in January 2008, a man threw his 4 children, aged 3, 2, 1, and a baby of 4 months old, from the Dauphin Island Bridge. Dauphin Island is a barrier island off of the coast of Alabama. That's 2 stories from Alabama. I just realized that. Thanks, Mom. It was Friday evening, and my husband and I were watching television in the living room. I grew up in this living room. I remember this. What a strange thing to be doing. I'm going to try to keep this serious from here on in. I kept hearing someone say, "Mama." From where I was sitting, the sound was coming from the other side of my husband. I brushed it off and initially thought I was just concerned about my boys, who were a bit under the weather and had left earlier with their father for the weekend. So I wasn't there. Obviously. Each time I heard the tiny voice, I looked up and in that direction. After maybe the 4th time, she materialized. She was hazy, but I could clearly see she was a tiny Asian girl of about 2. I said nothing, but I kept watching her. My husband noticed this and asked me what I was looking at. At first, I didn't tell him, as I was processing what was happening, and the next time I heard her call out, I looked again, and then my husband got serious and asked me to please tell him what I was seeing. I told him it was what little Hannah Luong, which is the girl they couldn't find, and she was calling for her mother. Then suddenly, there was a news break on TV, and we were watching, stating that all of the children had been found except for Hannah, the 2-year-old. They were asking for volunteers to come out and ride with the sheriff's flotilla to help look for her, and my husband walked over and knelt beside me, and he asked, what could he do to help me, to help her? And I told him I needed to go to the bridge. Okay. Remember, it was a cold January night. I was in shorts and a t-shirt. I needed to go change into warmer clothes, but strangely I was uncomfortable going to the bedroom alone. I asked my husband to come with me, and he declined, saying, I'm going to say, Mom, they come to you for a reason. You should go alone in case she has something else to reveal to you. And as I walked through our bedroom into the bathroom, water fell and landed on my forehead. I called out to my husband, and he came. There was a drop of water on my head, but as he reached up to check the door frame, it wasn't wet at all. As I dressed, he asked if I wanted to wake up early and go out to the flotilla to search for her. And I said yes, so he went ahead and set an alarm. We left our house for the 56-mile ride to Dauphin Island. As you're approaching the bridge, it's long, about the length of the shore, where you're looking over the bay and you can see the island. There was an extremely calm quiet. Neither of us spoke, and on that stretch of shoreline, I heard Hannah's tiny voice again several times, and she was saying, "Not here. I'm not here." We drove over the bridge and onto the island. We stopped, got water at the local convenience store, and I told my husband, we can go home now. I got what I needed. I drove home in silence, and he went to sleep. The next morning, January 21st, 2008, the alarm sounded at 4 a.m. My husband woke me up and told me it was time to go, and I said, no, there's no need to go. She's not there. She's not where they're looking. Later that day, we were watching television. I was folding laundry, and again, there was a news break. They reported that Hannah had been found that morning off the coast of Grand Isle, Louisiana. My husband's face drained of color, and he asked, "How did you know?" To which I replied, "She told me." Yeah. If you listen to my recent episode with Moleki Tererao, we were talking about kind of some paranormal stuff towards the end, and I brought the story up. I know I mistold it because I think I said New Orleans and not Dauphin Island. It's along the Gulf Coast area, and a few other details that I definitely got wrong. I remember my mom telling me this when I was very young, and I was super skeptical. I mean, I didn't believe in any of this stuff as a kid. Now I'm a bit more open-minded to it, and definitely reading through this again, it sends chills through your spine. I mean, this is a very famous story. I remember at the time it was a big deal. It was all over the news like every day. What a heinous thing to do. Evil. God, to throw your own children off of a bridge. I mean, obviously this guy was mentally ill and or possessed by something very, very, very dark. But my mother nonetheless had this experience, and the story doesn't seem to have changed. And oh my god, this is 2008. Yeah, hasn't changed since. Very, very, very scary. But also, it's nice, to have, I guess, a relatively happy ending. I'm assuming that the little girl was able to move on to the next life and be with her siblings. And gosh, um, yeah, spooky. What do you guys think? Was anybody listening to this? If you were in the area at the time, if you remember the news story, I'd like to hear what you think about it. But yeah, has anyone else heard of something like this? Like someone who was lost to a terrible, like a murder, a tragedy, and was going around seeking help to try to find their way home. That's crazy. I don't really know what to say other than thank you to everyone who wrote in. Happy Halloween, all that stuff. For you guys out there listening to this, if if you're scared to death, I don't know, go watch some TV, do something, be around somebody. Try not to fall asleep and have nightmares about it or anything. Again, if you missed your opportunity to get into this show, or if I didn't pick your story for some reason, obviously, I'm trying to keep it short here. Definitely send them over. You can email podcast@inthekeep.com, or you can join the Discord server, again, discord.inthekeep.com, and let us know. Really appreciate all of the support, from everybody on Patreon. It's been really, really nice to just get back to podcasting and to be, kind of changing the tide a little bit, little less just video games and a little more freedom to talk about whatever we like here. Definitely going to be doing more content like this in the future. Like I said, I'll do more, aliens. I'm thinking about doing like cryptids if you've seen like a Bigfoot or whatever. Just anything at all that people experience that's out of the ordinary. I'd love to hear about it. So, yeah, definitely stay tuned and look out for me to put out the next call to action, as we say, to see, what the next topic will be, or if it's another ghost, paranormal-oriented thing. I love you. God love you. Stay in the keep. Mwah.